turn your cameras off. And everyone but our instructor, please go on mute, and I will turn it over to Isaac. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for putting up with all the scheduling conflicts that were going around. But here we are. So, Her Excellency Kat asked me to teach and talk about is the Scribal Arts a service and how it is a service. To me, that could be a very simple question to answer, and you can do it in one word. Basically, yes, it's a service. But we're gonna try and talk a little bit more about that and why it's a service and how is it a service, and even go in and talk a little bit about the Scribal arts and various parts of the Scribal arts for those that might not be knowledgeable in that field. So I'm going to share a little slideshow. All right. So Scribal arts a service. There we go. So what are the Scribal arts? The term Scribal arts we tend to throw around, and for the most part, it covers the calligraphy and illumination that we use, and it's based on medieval manuscripts. The medieval manuscripts serve as our inspiration for the most part because they're pretty, they're decorative, and they look quite fancy. They're used to create basically certificates to recognize individuals for their hard work and effort within our society, usually given out during courts. Along with the word recognition given by the person in charge, the certificate is given to them. These certificates are also known as scrolls within the SCA, tend to be created by hand and at least have several hours of time devoted to it. So, how is doing art a service? Well, the society that we're all part of is a volunteer organization. We're all volunteering time, materials, and as far as the Scribal goes, we're creating something that adds to the ambiance and the enrichment of our hobby. A lot of teaching and sharing of knowledge goes with the Scribal arts. That's a service. And then at many events, people set a table or an area off to the side and call it a Scribal table. So you have people serving in a capacity to allow others to come and share in the hobby. So as far as creating a scroll, one of these documents that's given out in court a lot of times, there's many different steps. Again, these are done by hand. There's generally a layout and design, the calligraphy, the writing, calligraphy at the event. Somebody has to generally fill out the scroll, especially with like champion scrolls or that last minute piece of recognition that the crown or their excellencies of whatever group want to hand out. You've got the illumination, the painting of the scroll. And something that probably not a lot of people think about, you also have the text composition, what that award says. So one of these award scrolls can be worked on by several different individuals. And hundreds of hours are donated by the scribes in the various kingdoms and groups in creating these scrolls that are given out each reign, each year. sometimes the only recognition an artist receives is if the people handing out the award take the time to read their name out to the crowd. And in Onstiora, at least, we do a lot of preprint. So the preprint of the charters, as we also call them, basically a fancy way of saying it's a photocopy. So while that cuts down on a lot of the time that goes into making an award scroll, because the design and most of the calligraphy is already set, there's still the time that it takes to paint. And that time doesn't really go away. Teaching is a very big service. Teaching is the service of sharing knowledge and providing instruction to those looking for it. Teaching is also part of what we do as the SCA in our 501c3 nonprofit educational organizational status. So that's a big service. And then, as we were talking about a little earlier, the Scribal tables. The Scribal table is either a table or even a larger area set aside to people interested in the Scribal arts, the calligraphy, the illumination. There's typically a person in charge of it to organize everything, making sure there's supplies on hands, teachers available, examples to show new people. The organizers spend quite a bit of time trying to attract interest to their activity. And let's see. That's really all about I have. Go ahead and stop sharing that. Is there anything else anybody would like to add? Any questions?
I have a question. So it feels like this would be a difficult thing, although I completely, of course, agree with you and asked you to teach the class. Scribal Arts, our service. But so how is it determined? Like, say someone, you're looking at putting them in for an award. And typically we all think, okay, Thistle, because, they deserve a Thistle in calligraphy, illumination, whichever one, maybe both. But then, so at what point would you say, okay, that person's already gotten their Thistle? Where does it cross the line into they've done enough? It's just kind of a gray area to get that maybe crane or, even a Star of Merit for Scribal. Like how does that all work in your opinion?
I mean, we have Pelicans that got their Pelican from hosting charter painting tables through years of service. I mean, I think it becomes much like the arts awards are from, repetitive of doing of something, of sharing of something. The service awards are a lot of the same way. You're sharing your time, your knowledge.
So it would be more probably, okay, so if I'm just painting the charters and doing that, that is a service, but it would probably more come into I'm teaching, I'm running tables and things like that before you got that service level award for it.
I'm guessing so, but that depends on who's making the recommendations and
absolutely,
who's giving out the.
Yeah. There was something else I was thinking of, but I can't remember. So if anybody else has a question, feel free to jump in.
Hi, Isaac. It's Richard. How are you?
Doing all right, Richard. How about yourself?
Good. So, so just a comment. So about, Scribal is one of those services. It's dual faceted because you have the art side, but everything you're making, you're giving away. And that's what everybody has to understand. You're doing all this work, all this calligraphy or all this painting, and you're never going to see it again. It's going right out, you're sending it to somebody, or hopefully it gets sent to somebody and it's not destroyed in some rainstorm somewhere. But it's something you give, and it's a fundamental part of how the SCA recognizes people for other arts and other services. That is the service you are performing every time you do calligraphy and illumination on a scroll or painting. I mean, you are the grease that is causing the cogs of other wars to go forward. And I have talked with other kingdoms who they do all original charters,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a huge constant backlog for original charters, which there's something to be said for an original scroll. But you know it's really nice when you go to a court, or when we go back to court in person, you actually get a scroll with with your name on it, with the award that it was just read in court to all your friends who are there. And and I've seen pelicans made for not just for the painting, but the fact that they travel with the crown everywhere, and they are the scribe for the crown or several crowns, and they're known as a scribe that they always bring their scribal stuff with them to events, and any crown will tag them and say, I need you to fill out these scrolls now. And they just say, yes, your majesty, and go forward. So anyway, that was just my comment. So I'll stop now.
I remembered my other question. So if someone was interested in being someone who would like run a table at an event, or even being like a backup person to do, the scrolls on site, like you were talking about, putting in their names and stuff like that, who do they talk to about that? Because like I know when we were B&B, that was actually a problem that we had at some of our smaller events, where we'd be like, well, shoot, so and so isn't going, and they're usually our go-to, to get these awards filled in. So what are we going to do? And we'd actually designed a scroll where it would be written so that they didn't have to have the name filled in, because there was not going to be anybody there, but there may have been someone in that area that could have done it. We just didn't know them. So who would you recommend people talk to get more involved in that level or that aspect?
As far as Onstiora goes, we have a fairly active College of Scribes that is always looking for more people to join and to hang out with us at events. And I think that's how most of us sort of got interested, is we ran across it and went, oh, I like painting, or I like drawing, or I learned that calligraphy thing, in middle school or high school or way back when. And it just I ran across it due to the Baroness of Wiesenfeuer at the time handing me a book and saying, I think you could do this. And that was like 2000, year 2000. So that started a very long, windy, sometimes in-depth research and road to follow. So really, I think it's just make it known that you're interested, hang out with the people that do it, get known for it. And when you show up without your Scribal kit or your calligraphy box, people look at you like you're sick.
Oh, I thought maybe somebody else had a question, because I saw people unmuted. Does anybody else have a question?
Yes, my name's Alexandria Myers, and I'm from the Middle Kingdom. So I understand that this is mostly Onstiora people. Well, in the Middle Kingdom, the first question I have is, I've heard before about other kingdoms doing photocopied scrolls.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious how that works. And the second comment that I would like to put out there is that you asked about the different levels and that. Well, in the Middle Kingdom, for like the pelicans or for the laurels, there's like a track that you follow, and the first award would be like your AOA. The second award would be like a grant level of arms. And then there's usually like 4 that take you to the main one, you know, whether it be a laurel or a pelican.
Mm-hmm.
And it's by people seeing your progress and how much work you do. And then you getting acknowledged, and all those things get passed down to the crown, and getting involved in the Scribal community. Now, here in the Middle Kingdom, they put the awards out usually a month ahead, and they make the assignments, and they find out who's going to the event and that. And I do the illumination and the calligraphy, and all of our work is, unless some people will send in scroll blanks, and then someone just needs to come in and callig it. But I do both the calligraphy and the illumination, because for me, if I lay it out, I should be the one to do the calligraphy, because then that way I could move the calligraphy around to go around with the illumination. And if we don't have a scroll for them, if something comes up, then that's put into a backlog scroll, or that's given to someone to an assignment. And then when they leave, like one of our scrolls got missed, it went missing, and I had sent it off, and she knew she received it, but it didn't show up at the event. And she goes, I've lost the scroll. And I said, oh my goodness, that's not good. So I remember who it was for, and there was no reason for us to stay. So I said, I'm going to go home. I'll go home tonight. I'll start it and get everything, and then I will ship it off to the king and queen, because the person who was receiving it was in their group.
Mm-hmm.
And I went home, finished it, had it done Sunday. That was like a Saturday afternoon. We left early from the event, and we came home. I had it done by Sunday afternoon and shipped it off, and she had it at their Tuesday meeting for them to present it to her. And that's just kind of like how we do things in the Middle Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, because everything's been shut down, we've been working on clearing up all the backlog scrolls. But the question I had was, a lot of people, I've heard that they do the photocopies, and I was curious how that worked.
Okay, Lilith, as a former Kingdom signet.
Okay, I would be happy to step in
help
on this
explain?
one. I'm Lilith McGuffin. I was our Kingdom scribe a few scribes back. The way the preprints generally work in a kingdom is the kingdom has a set number of scribes in the kingdom with permission to copy the line. It's the line work and the calligraphy. So the painting is never copied. It's just the line work and the calligraphy. And we have a multitude. We currently have something like 108 designs, something like that, across the various awards for the kingdom. There's multiple designs, so that they're not all exactly the same, and they're never painted the same. But we have, the kingdom supplies the paper, and the only people who can make those copies are the regionals, the kingdom scribe, the royal scribe. It's a set number of people who have sets of masters. So you're never making copies of copies, because then your copies go to crap really fast. Who make and distribute and make sure that they hand out the scrolls that we need the most of, and that those come back in, and then they go to the crown's scribe, who then puts names when the crown contacts them and says, okay, here's our list of people for this event in the next, hopefully they have at least 2 weeks notice. Here's the 10, 15, 20 awards we're giving out in the pre-COVID world, please, put names. They'll go through and look at all the different ones that they've got and pick one that matches that person, design, color, whatever persona, and they'll fill in the date and the name and the information for the event. And one of the reasons, I had a wonderful conversation several years ago when I was Star Signet on Steora hosted Known World. And about 5 of us signets were all there at the same time. So we all hung out after hours in the hotel restaurant and had a conversation and talked about how we did things in our different kingdoms, and you know, because interkingdom anthropology is fascinating. And what we did discover is that a lot of the kingdoms that have preprints tend to have overall a lower population, sometimes as a whole, but often a lower population of artists that are trained or are at the point where they're willing or comfortable doing or have the time for it. It varies a little bit, entirely original work. The Tiger Signet of the East was kind enough to show me her brilliant spreadsheet that she kept, because they do all originals. And it had every single scribe and calligrapher in her kingdom, what they did, the styles they did, what they were willing to do. Did they work with other people? Did they do everything alone? And what times of year they were available based on their employment and their lives. Like the people who did tax season, blocked right off for 3 months, you know, around tax season. And it was really interesting to do that. And then when I got back, I created a similar spreadsheet and sent it out across the kingdom. But my request included space for, if all you do is put calligraphy on scrolls at events, you know, like you're willing to do names. If all you do is paint at charter tables, fill this out anyway. And just tell us what you do, because they count. You know, I'm like, you count as scribes, you count as illuminators, please include yourself. And including all of them at the time, we ended up with 55 people. And
That's
about 15
wonderful.
of those were doing original work, 15 to 20.
That's wonderful.
Which was lovely. But compared to the 65 to 70 that East Kingdom had doing entirely original work, entirely original, because they weren't even including their beginner scribes, basically. It was just a telling difference. So it's not necessarily that you know, all the systems work for different kingdoms, because I wish we had, you know, New York City to pull from.
Yeah.
With all of its art colleges. We all wish we had New York City to pull from, I'm sure. But you know, but it helps spark conversations. Like one of the conversations we do have in Onsteora is, how can we train more people to be comfortable doing original work? You know, coming up, you know, where they've brought up, you know, and let's face it, these days arts in schools are not at their best. So some of these people are coming up and they've always wanted to do art, but they've never gotten the training. And you know, when I you know, just moved out of a group that was primarily a college town. So you get all these, you know, 18 to 20 or 21-year-olds who are like, I really, really want to do this, but I have no idea how. And sometimes they're more nervous, and sometimes they just want to jump right in, you know, just like teaching anybody. So our conversation is often, how can we do more original? But it is nice to have those, because the preprints also make a great place for people to start when they're convinced. Is you sit them down and you put it there, and you just we're like, can you paint between the lines? Can you stay in the lines? Because almost all of them are like, yeah, I can stay in the lines. And it's a good place to get them started. But of course we want them to learn if they want to, you know, to enjoy it. But it's just it's a different culture. And so but that's how that generally works. And we just keep a lot of control over, you know, the quality of the paper and the quality of the copying. And if they're inexperienced scribes, they're probably at a Scribal table or a local Scribal meeting with an experienced scribe there to offer advice and suggestions, you know, and encouragement. We don't send blanks home with people who don't know what they're doing.
Well, that's really, now I feel a little bit better, because I kept thinking of someone had a copying machine somewhere in the back and they're just made a picture and that and stuff. But so no, that's really great. I feel better understanding that. And now with the pandemic, it's like all of the boundaries, because so much is now doing the Zoom, and all the boundaries have kind of like blurred. So I think it would be interesting for those who do the original work and the calligraphy to make themselves willing, because a lot of times people will do stuff at home but can't attend the event, and we ship them to wherever they need to go. So this is something we might want to reach out, possibly if there's way to do it, that people like from Mid-Realm if you need a scroll, and then in Anstiora, if someone's willing to do it, because there's nothing really going on right now, to volunteer to help, like I'd be more than happy to help any kingdom that needed scribal work. And I use the Pergmenta, and I even do the vellum, and I do all the way up to peerage scrolls and all of that. So that might be something for us to look to in the near future, because so many of the boundaries have closed with the Zoom, that maybe we can help those other smaller areas so that they can have maybe more original art and stuff like that. But that's something to put out there possibly.
Yeah, things have definitely changed, like you said, with Zoom. And, we're going to each other's events in other kingdoms, and we're meeting people from other kingdoms. And I think that's a big positive of the pandemic, is the collaboration that we've all kind of started to see. So that's fantastic. Thank you. We appreciate that.
I had a quick question, or sort of a question. I don't know if you guys can actually hear me or not. But okay. So is there any way to get any sort of like worksheets for things like calligraphy? So I was just sort of a random question. It's probably a better question for like a little more local group, but I was just thinking, I'm like, you know what? I always say I want to get into calligraphy, but it's so hard because I'm a lefty and trying to watch people do stuff, because most of the stuff are set up for righties. They tend to smudge, and smudge bad. But yeah.
So I'm
There
going
is
to go ahead and promote a friends group that just recently started. Honorable Lord Ian the Green has set up a Facebook group, Greenman Calligraphy. One of the big goals was to actually find enough instructors who can teach left-handed or are left-handed and are willing to teach, to help build that knowledge base that is so lacking right now. So there, over half the instructors, I want to say, are either willing to teach or are lefties. And we're on about week 4 of the videos. All the videos are being posted to YouTube. In fact, Master Richard is the one that does the Zoom hosting and the video posting, so I'm sure he can direct you even better than I can. But I would definitely, seriously, if you're interested in calligraphy, check out Greenman Calligraphy. I've been doing this since early 2000s, and I'm still learning stuff from Ian. So I'd highly recommend it for anybody who's interested in calligraphy.
Yeah, going off what Isaac was talking about. So we have usually weekly calls, Zoom calls, every Sunday, usually at 3:00. And what you get to see is Ian doing a certain style of calligraphy, and he'll start from A and work to Z, and he'll draw it right there in front of you, so you're watching it as it happens, and he'll send out what's called a ductus prior to that, which is an instruction of how you do the calligraphy, how you draw it. And you can practice along with him and then ask questions. And then, as Isaac was talking about, there are lots of instructors, especially those that are left-handed. So what we do is we encourage people to practice on their own and then post to usually you're assigned whether you're right or left-handed and by your last name to a set of instructors, and you can either post to them or you can post to the Facebook group, and people will give you honest, good critique of what they think you're doing or what they think you're doing wrong. And it's a very good way. I don't get to practice much because I'm usually hosting, but it's a great way to learn. I've already learned a lot, and especially in calligraphy, since Isaac and Elias can tell you I'm a rank newbie. I know nothing. I come to their weekly scribbles when I can, and I'm always asking questions. I'm not shy, so I'm a rank newbie, and it helps a lot. So and if you want to, I can post in the chat his Ian the Green's YouTube channel, which already has recordings of those classes, so I can share those. But
That
I
would
have
be
a
great.
question. I have a question after that.
Go for it.
Okay, so here's my question. So I'm new, but Scribal is really important, as I think I've already said. It's the grease that keeps the wheels moving. It really is. And so, how can I promote more Scribal? Okay, I can't teach, but
Mhm.
what can I do to promote more Scribal? All right,
One
I
of
say I could teach, but I wouldn't be very good at it. So,
one of the things I did when I first started is I volunteered to do. I let my friends know what I was doing. You know, I went and got copies and shared what little I did know because, with nothing else, trying to teach someone else how to do it really reinforces your ability to do yourself. So, there's that. And I think just, you know, help throw it under a spotlight. Let other people see that, hey, I might suck at this, but I'm having fun. Come hang out with me.
Well, and being somebody maybe that, when we do get back to events, runs those tables at events, because you don't have to necessarily be a really good scribe to run a table. You just have to, procure the space and bring the supplies and be the person there to, oversee it. So,
yeah,
That's how I got into it. Go ahead, sorry.
oh no, go ahead, go ahead. I can ask my
That's
question
how
later. That's fine.
that's how I got into it. I saw Shanna Banana have a table, and I got really excited because I laid to painting. So I'm like, oh hey, colors! And so yeah, sorry, that was it.
So what I was going, since in OnStewR we have basically pre-printed charters that have to be colored.
Mhm.
So is there, a ranking necessarily, not of difficulty of charters? So I mean, so are certain like AOA charters, are they the easiest? I mean, I would think they would be, but I don't know. So if I was going to take, if I had the ability to make copies and bring charters to a Scribal table, what kind of thing should I encourage people to color?
So, and really, while yes, generally the AOA level awards have the less complicated scrolls to paint, because the bigger the award, the higher the rank, the fancier the scroll. Not all designs are created equal.
Right.
There are definitely some that for beginners, experienced charter painting, table runners will be like, okay, here's my pile of, when they're like, I want to paint something, you offer them one of the designs that is less complicated. Designs with incredibly tiny spaces are not things you want to hand beginners. So big spaces that are clearly defined, where it's pretty easy to tell where they want to put colors, because they're still going to look great when they're done. They don't have to be the really fancy fruity things, but nothing that's going to be really, well, not hard, but I'm trying to think of the right word here this evening. But none of the ones that are going to take 6 hours for, just to do the basic color fill, because especially if they're new, not everybody is ready to sit and spend 10 or 15 or 20 hours on a piece of artwork. And if they're slow because they're new, or they're just not a fast painter, because not everybody is a fast painter. Speed has nothing to do with skill. Really, no. So it's that balance. I try to give them something simple. I try to give, but pretty, or I give them a choice of between 3 or 4 simple ones to start with, because they're also not as intimidating. So yes, often that's AOA level, kind of across the board, but then some of them do have little fiddly, like acanthus leaves, or they're not a big complicated design, but they have lots of little fiddly bits. And some people want to tackle those. So I might have one there, because the first thing I usually do with somebody who's like, I'm fairly new to the SCA, I want to do art, is I ask them if they have an art background. because sometimes that person is new to the SCA and new to gouache or medieval illumination, but they've done other art. And if you know that they already know how to use oil paints or their, pencils and shading and coloring, there are certain skills they already possess and certain language they already understand. And they're probably ready. They might be ready to try something a little more complicated just as a starting piece because they already have some art background.
Can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
So I also have, whenever I do even something at my house, I call them color book pages, but I also have ones that are on paper that aren't the charters for people to play with, especially kids or teenagers. But sometimes grownups who are just nervous about ruining what they think is a nice scroll. And I let them play with that and kind of see within a few minutes how they're doing. Because I'm kind of the opposite. I don't like the big open areas because I find it harder to get the paint to lay down evenly. I like the smaller ones because it's easier for me to, especially when I first started, to fill those in nicely instead of having big open areas. Because some of those are designed so that you can add your own touches and your own designs, and sometimes that's intimidating. So yeah, I kind of try to find that balance of it's a little bit easier to do for the newbies, but the color book seems to be kind of popular. So I just have lots of crazy copies of just random stuff that's medievalish looking. So.
I do, yeah, exactly. And that's why I said why I usually offer them a series of options of level, because you don't know. But I do also have a lot of small projects, starting with when we started doing our local demos, started involving crafts and like interactives because we were a college town and college kids like to get, hands-on with things if you want to suck them in. But we needed projects people could do in 20 to 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I found a whole bunch, lovely Laurel out of Another Kingdom. I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but I have the website saved somewhere. Had put up a bunch of bookmarks with designs that
we've done those too. Yeah, those are great.
And it was open use for SCA purposes. And so I have those printed on the decent paper. I mean, just the paper that we use. They're not on Perg or vellum, but they're easy to make a whole bunch of them on the decent paper. And so I had those for demos and for beginners and for children, because yes, kids desperately want to paint and you don't want to discourage them. So I give them the little takeaway project because they also don't have to give that one back. It's their practice piece.
Yeah, that's a great starter one.
So I do
it's have also good to have separate paints for little ones than adults because I've seen little ones destroy a palette where, you don't necessarily want that happening with your really nice paints. Not that you're going to give them crap, but, I'm just saying maybe have separate palettes for both.
Well, and the thing that I've noticed, just real quick, is that you can, in fact, teach children to respect the materials at the beginning. They will listen, and if you explain it properly and why they want to rinse their brush well between colors, why they want to not mangle the brush down on things, etc. Most of them are willing to listen. I actually had a really great time teaching one of the children's Scribal classes at Gulf Wars. There were like 40 kids in that room between the ages of about 6 and 12 was the age group that I had. And they were actually very attentive to and followed the rules about, why is it important that your brush is clean and that you don't pull colors into each other? And because then they were, they don't want their colors to turn to mud, so you just giving them that here's why you want to do this, not this is what you have to do. I find works pretty well with kids just as it would with anyone else. Yes.
I also find that for beginners, a real good source to understand what the charters might look at, the College of Scribes has a gallery of most of the charters that have been done by several of the scribes, including Sarah Penrose and Lilius and several others. But there's several variations on color that you can see how each of them are put together, how the colors act with each other and how it flows. And that is a great source for beginners because they can see what they're trying to get at when they're painting their charters. It makes a really good resource.
Awesome. Thank you. Did anybody else have any questions or comments to ask?
I have a question actually. My name's Myra. I'm here in Namron in Onsteora. During the pandemic, I've been wanting to paint some charters, but I wasn't sure how to get my hands on them. What is the best way to request some charters so I can do some painting at home?
So Volana in Namron is the Northern Regional Scribe, and she has a pile of charters. So,
all right, I will message her then. I am friends with Volana, yes.
She has all the Northern Regional supplies.
Awesome. I will talk to her then. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
She lives in Norman, so she should be close-ish for you guys to coordinate. So,
all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? No? All righty. Well, thank you so much, Isaac. I appreciate you agreeing to tackle this somewhat tough topic for me. And Lewis, for all your added information. Actually, everybody that asked questions and contributed. That was awesome. Great class.
I put in the chat the Facebook group for the Ian the Green's calligraphy group, and from there you can see the actual YouTube videos and go to his channel, so you can see those recordings there.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I didn't even know that was a thing. So learning, always learning. All right, everybody. Well, have a good night. I will get the video posted later this week for those that wanted to attend and weren't able to make it. And we'll talk to everybody later. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.